During our honeymoon, my mother-in-law shocked me by stealing my $40,000 diamond necklace. When we got home, I asked her about it. She got furious, slapped me hard, and pushed me against the wall. To my disbelief, my husband took her side. Heartbroken, I left the house, determined to get revenge. They didn't know I had a big surprise plan that would change everything. My name is Camille. I'm 31 years old and work as a software developer in Indianapolis. When I think about my life, I still remember the joy of my wedding day. I was full of hope and love for Nick, my college sweetheart. We had met in university, bonding over late-night study sessions and dreams for the future. I thought I had found my perfect partner. But as they say, life isn't always a fairy tale. Soon after we got married, things started to fall apart. The first signs were small, like a tiny crack that slowly grows into a disaster. The main issue? Nick's mother, Sabrina. Sabrina, a woman in her mid-60s, raised Nick alone and was very protective of him. I saw their closeness when we were dating. She would call him several times a day, asking where he was and seeking his opinion on everything. I thought it was just a quirky part of their relationship, something I could handle. Love is about compromise, right? But after we got married, her behavior went from quirky to controlling. Sabrina began criticizing everything I did, how I decorated our home, the meals I cooked, even small choices I made. One day, she showed up unannounced while I was trying a new recipe. "What are you cooking, Camille?" "That looks awful," she said, giving me a disgusted look like I was ruining a science experiment. "Just trying a new pasta dish, Sabrina," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Isn't it a bit too rich?" "You should stick to the basics," she replied, shaking her head. It became clear that Sabrina didn't just want to visit. She wanted to control every part of our lives. And my husband, Nick? He didn't see a problem. That's when I knew my happily ever after wasn't going to be as simple as I thought. I felt my face heat up with embarrassment, but I tried to brush it off. I kept telling myself, she means well. Even when her comments felt more hurtful than helpful, I convinced myself she was trying to help. But as the weeks turned into months, her visits became more frequent and less welcome. She would show up unannounced, using a spare key I didn't even know she had. I'd walk into the living room to find her moving the furniture around like it was her own house. "This will make the room feel more open," she'd say, waving off my concerns when I hesitated to agree. The tension between Sabrina and me kept growing, but Nick seemed completely unaware. Whenever I brought it up, he'd just shrug and say, "You know how my mom is. Just try to be patient." It was so frustrating. How could he not see how much her behavior was upsetting me? I felt like I was all alone, stuck in a situation where my feelings didn't matter. The love I had for Nick started to fade under the weight of my frustration and hurt. Then one day, Nick suggested we take a honeymoon trip to Miami Beach. He said it would be a chance to reconnect and take a break from all the chaos. For the first time in a while, I felt hopeful. A break from Sabrina was exactly what we needed. But my relief didn't last long. Sabrina insisted on coming with us. "Nick, I don't think that's a good idea," I said, trying not to sound too panicked. For the first time, Nick stood up to her. "Mom, this isn't a family trip. It's our honeymoon. Just Camille and me." I was shocked but relieved. Maybe there was hope for us after all. The trip went well, and when we got back, I felt closer to Nick than I had in months. I was excited to be home, thinking things might finally get better. But when I opened the door to our bedroom, my heart sank. The room was a mess. Clothes were scattered everywhere, drawers were broken, and my diamond necklace, a $40,000 wedding gift from my mother, was gone. "Nick, come here," I screamed, my voice shaking. "What's wrong?" he said, running into the room. "My necklace is gone. Look at this mess. What happened here?" I said, pointing at the chaos. Nick's face turned pale as he looked around. "I don't know, this is so strange," he muttered, sounding confused and worried. Desperate, I turned to him. "Do you think it could have been—" "No, Camille," he interrupted, his tone defensive. "I can't believe my mom would do something like this." I swallowed hard, feeling a tight knot in my stomach. Deep down, a suspicion was growing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Sabrina had something to do with this. I needed answers. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, thinking about the mess in our bedroom and the missing necklace. How could Sabrina betray me like this? The woman I once thought was just overbearing now seemed like someone I should fear. The next day, I decided to do something about it. I went to several jewelry stores, hoping to find any sign of my necklace. After hours of searching and almost giving up, I stumbled upon a small shop tucked away in a corner of the city. As I looked through the displays, my heart stopped. There it was, my diamond necklace, sparkling under the glass. "Excuse me," I called to the shopkeeper. "Can I see that necklace, please?" When I held it in my hands, it felt like the ground had shifted under me. I needed answers. "Can you show me the CCTV footage of when this necklace came in?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm despite the storm of emotions inside me. The shopkeeper agreed, and we watched the footage together. My heart sank as I saw Sabrina, my mother-in-law, clearly handing over the necklace. I felt a rush of emotions, betrayal, anger, and disbelief. Furious, I rushed home, determined to confront her. When I reached the house, I found Sabrina already there, standing by the door with her arms crossed and a smug smile on her face. "What are you doing here, Camille? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said mockingly. "Don't play games with me, Sabrina." "I know what you did," I snapped, my voice firm even as my heart pounded. Her smile faltered for just a moment, and in that instant, I felt a surge of confidence. I had proof. But as I prepared to confront her, I realized I had no idea just how deep her betrayal went. Standing at the doorstep, I took a deep breath to steady myself. Sabrina's presence felt suffocating, and my anger was bubbling up like a volcano about to erupt. I never imagined confronting her would feel like this, like stepping onto a battlefield with everything at stake. "Camille, why are you staring at me like that? If you have something to say, just say it," Sabrina said, her voice dripping with mockery. "Enough with the games, Sabrina. I know you sold my diamond necklace," I said, my anger finally spilling over. I blurted out, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "I saw you on the security footage at the jewelry store." Sabrina's expression changed instantly. The smug look disappeared, replaced by anger. "How dare you accuse me of stealing?" she snapped, her voice rising. "You've always had a wild imagination, haven't you?" "I'm not imagining anything," I shot back, stepping closer. "You took something that doesn't belong to you, and it's time you admit it." Sabrina's eyes narrowed, and she stepped forward, invading my space. "You think you can come into my house and throw accusations at me? You're just jealous that I raised Nick alone, and that he still cares for me. You'll never be as important as his mother," she hissed, her words dripping with venom. "Being his wife doesn't mean I'm less important," I said, my heart pounding. "You need to understand that I'm part of this family too, but you act like I'm just an inconvenience." The need to defend myself overwhelmed me. I wasn't going to back down this time. Just then, Nick walked in, carrying a bag of groceries. He stopped in his tracks when he saw us, the tension thick in the air. He dropped the bag and rushed over. "What's going on? Why does it look like you two are about to kill each other?" "Sabrina has been lying to me, Nick. I know she sold my necklace, and I'm done pretending everything is fine," I said, my voice rising. I turned to him, desperate for him to believe me. "You need to trust me. I have proof." Nick looked back and forth between us, confusion all over his face. "Mom, is this true?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I didn't do anything," Sabrina said quickly, throwing her hands up. "Camille is just trying to stir up trouble because she can't handle that I'm still part of your life." Nick's gaze shifted between us. I could see the conflict in his eyes. "I need to hear this from both of you. What exactly happened?" he asked, trying to stay calm. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. "Nick, I found the necklace at a pawn shop. I have the footage. Your mother sold it while we were on our honeymoon," I said, the words tumbling out. Nick turned to Sabrina, who was now visibly nervous. Her usual confident demeanor was slipping. "Is that true? Did you sell Camille's necklace?" he asked her directly.
I,
I borrowed it, Sabrina stammered, trying to twist the story. I thought it was just lying around. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. Borrowed? I snapped. It's not borrowing if you sell it. I shouted, my frustration spilling over. You stole it. You knew how much it meant to me. Stop yelling, both of you, Nick shouted, his voice echoing through the small space. This isn't helping. Mom. Why would you do something like this? It was a mistake. Sabrina snapped defensively. I thought it was just an old piece of jewelry, something forgotten. I didn't know it was special to her. Enough of your excuses, I exclaimed. You've disrespected me since day one. I've tried to be patient, but this crosses the line. Nick stayed silent, and the silence felt like a heavy weight. I stood there, waiting for him to either defend me or let me fall. I can't believe this, Nick finally said, looking defeated. Mom, you have to understand. What you did is unacceptable. We need to figure out how to fix this. Fix this? I said, my voice trembling. How can we fix this when she's made it clear she doesn't respect me? I'm done being the one who has to compromise. You need to make a choice, Nick. Sabrina's eyes burned with anger as she stepped back, her face darkening. You think you can come into my family and make demands? You're nothing without my son. Her words hit me like a slap. I felt tears prick my eyes but forced myself to stand tall. I am not nothing. I'm his wife, and I deserve your respect. Nick looked between us, torn and overwhelmed. I need time to think, he finally said, his voice low. I can't deal with this right now. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me alone with Sabrina. The tension in the air was suffocating. I felt despair creep in, knowing we had hit a breaking point. Your husband is weak, Camille, Sabrina sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. You'll never win this fight. I will always be his mother. Her words were like poison, but in that moment, I knew I couldn't stay in this toxic environment. I felt like a puppet being controlled, and it was time to cut the strings. I had to take back my life, my dignity, and my identity. With that thought, I turned and walked out, determined to seek justice for the betrayal I had suffered. Leaving Nick and Sabrina in that heated moment was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. It felt like I was walking away from my marriage, but I knew staying would only lead to more pain. I drove to my mom's house, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. I couldn't let Sabrina's betrayal go unpunished. When I arrived, my mom was in the kitchen, humming as she made dinner. The comforting smell of her lasagna filled the air, and for a moment, I felt at ease. But the weight of everything that happened came crashing back when I told her about the day. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry you're dealing with this, she said, her face full of concern. You deserve so much better. I need to do something about it, Mom, I said firmly. I can't just let her get away with this. I'm going to report her to the police. My mom nodded, her determination matching mine. If that's what you need to do, I'm here to support you. We'll gather whatever evidence you need. That night, we went through the footage from the jewelry store and wrote down everything that had happened. I documented my conversations with Nick, pointing out how dismissive he had been about Sabrina's behavior. For the first time in a while, I felt like I was taking back control of my life. The next day, I called the local police department and scheduled an appointment to report the theft. As I got ready for the meeting, I felt a swirl of emotions, nervousness, anger, but also a sense of purpose. I wasn't going to be the quiet wife who let others push her around anymore. At the police station, an officer welcomed me and took me into a small room to discuss the case. I showed him the footage of Sabrina selling the necklace and explained the situation. The officer listened carefully, nodding as I spoke. This is a serious matter, Miss Miller, he said, his tone calm and reassuring. Theft is not something we take lightly. We'll need to investigate further, but I promise we'll do everything we can to help you. Relief washed over me as I left the station. I had taken the first step toward justice, and it felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. No matter how hard it got, I was determined to see this through. Over the next few days, the police worked on my case. They gathered evidence and contacted pawn shops in the area. They confirmed the sale of my necklace and uncovered other details that suggested Sabrina had a history of questionable behavior. One afternoon, as I sat at my mom's kitchen table, my phone rang. It was the officer I had spoken to earlier. "Miss Miller," he said, "we've gathered enough evidence to move forward with an arrest. Would you like to be present when we take your mother-in-law into custody?" I hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the situation. But then I remembered everything Sabrina had done, how she had hurt me, invaded my life, and disrespected my marriage. "Yes, I want to be there," I said firmly. The next day, I drove to the spot where the police planned to arrest Sabrina. My heart was racing, and anxiety bubbled inside me. I couldn't believe it had come to this. The woman who was supposed to support me was about to face the consequences of her actions. When the police arrived, they approached Sabrina as she was leaving her house. Her usual arrogance was gone. I watched from a distance, my heart pounding in my chest. "Sabrina Ellen, you are under arrest for theft," the officer announced. A surge of triumph swept through me. This was justice. As they handcuffed her and led her away, I stood there, watching her world fall apart. In that moment, I realized I was free from her control and the weight she had placed on my life. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a survivor, ready to take back my life. The day Sabrina was arrested changed everything for me. I had faced her and taken control of my own story. After the police took her away, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and empowerment. I knew I had done the right thing, but it still weighed heavily on me. In the days that followed, the legal process moved quickly. Sabrina faced serious theft charges, and I began to feel a sense of closure. But I also had to face the reality that my marriage to Nick was barely holding together. Nick reached out to me several times, asking to talk. I was hesitant, but knew we couldn't avoid the conversation forever. One evening, we agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. As I walked in, I felt both hope and dread. Could we save our relationship, or was it too late? "Camille, I'm so glad you agreed to meet," Nick said, his voice shaky as he sat down across from me. "I've been sick about you." "I've been worried about you too, Nick," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "But we need to talk about everything that's happened. You have to understand how much your mother's actions hurt me, and how your lack of support made it worse." Nick nodded, looking down at his coffee. "I know," he said quietly. "I can't believe she would do something like that. I should have stood up for you sooner." "I'm sorry," Nick said. "Sorry isn't enough, Nick," I replied, my voice rising slightly. "Your mother has caused so much damage, and I've lost trust in both of you. You need to decide whose side you're on." "I'm on your side, Camille." "I love you," he said, desperation clear in his voice. "Then you need to prove it," I said, struggling to keep my emotions steady. "I can't stay in a marriage where I feel like I'm less important. You need to choose me or her." We talked for hours, but it became clear the gap between us was too big. Even though Nick said he loved me, I couldn't shake the feeling that his loyalty to his mother would always come first. As we said goodbye that evening, I knew what I had to do. The following week, I filed for divorce. It was painful, but I felt lighter, like I had finally let go of a burden I had been carrying for too long. Sabrina's court date was set a few weeks later. When the day arrived, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions. When she walked into the courtroom, she looked older and more worn down than I had ever seen her. It was a stark reminder of how much damage had been done. The proceedings were quick. The evidence was clear, and it didn't take long for the judge to give a verdict. Sabrina was sentenced to community service, ordered to pay restitution for the necklace, and fined $40,000. As the judge struck the gavel, I felt a wave of vindication. Justice had been served, and I had taken my life back. With the divorce finalized shortly after and Sabrina held accountable, I began to focus on my future. I threw myself into my career, taking on projects that inspired me. I picked up new hobbies, explored the city, and spent quality time with my mom, who had been my biggest support through it all. In the months that followed, I learned to love my independence. I found strength in standing on my own and started to rebuild my life on my terms. I reflected on the lessons I had learned about trust, self-respect, and the importance of standing up for myself. One evening, as I sat in my apartment sipping a glass of wine and watching the sunset over the city, I felt a deep sense of peace. I was no longer tied to the toxic relationships of my past. I had turned the page and was ready to start a bright new chapter, full of hope and possibilities. I had faced betrayal, fought for justice, and reclaimed my life. Now I was finally free,